Hello and welcome to this edition of Crossover. I'm Ji Xiaojun with Charlotte and Richard.
Hey.
Welcome again to Crossover. Are you a rich guy, Richard? Do you have to worry about your living will?
Well, actually, no. I've been saved the burden of the stress that comes with financial responsibility by having nothing. So I've managed to find a loophole in that.
That's right. I mean, sometimes it is a relief to be an ordinary guy.
Not have to worry about all that.
Exactly.
Yep.
I mean, if you're as rich as Bill Gates or Warren Buffett or Li Ka-shing, that's the business tycoon in Hong Kong. He's probably the richest Chinese in the world because you know, and he also has that problem. He's now in his 80s, 85 or 86.
Looks great.
He's standing. This photograph was taken just in front of his pool. Some people mistake it for the ocean, but that's actually just his...
That's right, because he's the rich guy.
Yeah.
Now, he released actually a statement. Those are the pictures of his two sons, and he's released a statement saying that all the stocks and securities that he owns will go to the oldest son.
Right.
Well, maybe all the cash will go to this son, the second son, the younger son. And also a large part of his wealth will go to a charity organization.
Well, he has his own, I think.
That's right.
Foundation.
Yeah, his foundation. So at least, I mean, he solved this problem, the estate problem, you know, when he, well, one day passes away. Because this is indeed a big headache for lots of, you know, wealthy people, all these tycoons. It happened with the tycoon in Taiwan, Wang Yongqing.
Right.
And it seems that his sons and his wives, I should say, and are fighting for their part of the pie, their share of their estate.
You know, it's interesting, I think, because traditionally, at least in China, you don't really, it's, first of all, wills or, you know, things like this, it's not something you really talk about much.
It brings bad luck.
Right, it's not, it's not a lucky thing or, you know, an auspicious thing to talk about. And secondly, I think up until now, you wouldn't hear news like this of someone, you know, before they pass away deciding, you know, okay, so this part of my fortune is going to so-and-so and this part, you know, traditionally anyway, it's not part of how things are done here.
I guess this is because, I mean, well, Li Ka-shing, he himself is in good health these days, and he's seen all these sad stories happening with other big families. And so I guess this is a wise decision.
I suppose it's just another type of management, really, isn't it? I mean, for a man who has made his fortune through his intelligence and making executive decisions, his living will or the arrangements of what will happen to his money and his properties, while he's still of sound mind and body, would seem like the most logical course of action to take. And I'm sure he has his own legal team, which would say that now is the time for you to make preparations. And it's just prudence, really. I think the idea in China of not talking about a will is a common concept, not just in China, but in Ireland, for example. A similar situation existed in the early part of this century, where, particularly in the countryside, people are very suspicious about certain things. But it's unusual, even though you'd be suspicious about certain things, things like making a living will and providing for your family are seen as not so much a joyous thing, but kind of like a responsibility. So it would be okay to talk about, for example, if you had property, when I pass on, for example, who will get what part of the land. And certainly, even while you're still alive, you would say, okay, this is as much land we have. I give this percentage to my eldest son, and this is the middle son, and this is to the final.
When would you normally, you know, think about that?
Well, as I say, this would be the early part of the century for the countryside folk. Would be usually when the children have reached a certain age. Usually, when the eldest son is around 18 years old. Okay. And then he's responsible for the upkeep of the farm. But now, though, there are advertisements on television and in radio in Ireland for "Have you made a will?" reminding people that a will, like a pension, isn't something for the elderly. It's something you should be doing now to not only help yourself have peace of mind, but also to avoid unnecessary troubles later on down the road. Because if you don't have a will, it has to go to court. like if you have property, if you have a house, like who gets what. You know? So now it's become more and more commonplace to see advertisements about wills, and usually through law firms.
I know in the States, common practice among people, whether they're not very wealthy or, you know, people of all incomes and all financial standings, as soon as you have children, I think it's a big time for a lot of people to go have a will, you know, drawn up. Because if something were to happen to the parents, then, you know, that's kind of a practice.
Michael Jackson passed away all of a sudden. People didn't expect that happen, and obviously he didn't expect it would come that soon. So all these complications involved, and there was that actress and singer in Hong Kong. She passed away out of cancer, I guess, and her families are now still fighting for their share of her estate. And her mother, because the relationship between the actress and singer with her mother was not that good, and she obviously didn't leave any part of her estate to her mother. And her mother was kind of fighting, saying, you know, I'm her mother, and I'm entitled to a certain part of her estate.
I think in that case, though, if a person makes a will and stipulates that I don't want any part of my property going to this person. I mean, you mentioned Michael Jackson. He actually did write in his will, his father was to receive nothing, but his mother was to get the majority, and his children were then to get, like, a trust fund was set up.
I mean, this is interesting, because according to our understanding of the traditional moral standards in China, parents are parents. I mean, you can't really, if you do write something, a line like this, hey, you're not going to get anything from me. You know, it's a harsh thing to accept, actually, according to the Chinese culture.
And that's, I think, a huge difference, I think, between many, I think more specifically Western cultures and Chinese culture. You know, we sort of are more individual entities, and so yes, you might be my parents, but I am myself, and I've made my fortune or not, and you know, it's mine to do what I choose with. Whereas here, you know, it's not, you know, the boundaries aren't as defined in a family.
Talking about these big families or these tycoon, you know, giants, there is one giant family or tycoon family that, you know, the whole world is aware of and very interested in. Murdoch family. And I mean, with Li Ka-shing, the Chinese tycoon, and obviously he's made his arrangement. So that solves the potential problems that might come in the future.
Hopefully.
Hopefully.
Although I wouldn't be surprised if it all goes to court in the end anyway.
That's right.
It seems to be quite.
And with the Murdoch family, it seems, you know, he's already in his 80s, right? And, well, people have speculations about who is going to be, you know, the inheritor of his wealth, and who is going to be the dominant one. He's married to his new Chinese wife a few years back, and she's not entitled to any part of his estate, actually, and future, according to the arrangement. But, you know, it doesn't say about their daughters, you know. And all these, it's like it's a live drama, you know, that we see.
Well, I mean, it's different, obviously, for different people, but when you're talking about the examples you've just mentioned, they're kind of extreme examples. You're talking about the top 5% of the world's wealth is in these people's hands. I mean, Rupert Murdoch practically owns at least 70% of the world's news. The Rupert Murdoch Group is just this massive conglomerate, and it's subsidiaries of newspapers and media outlets all over the world. So you're talking billions, and you're talking of untold billions in the future about the copyright and all that kind of stuff. I'm not familiar with his own family setup or his wife, if she's independently wealthy, but it would strike as being regular if he left a trust fund for his children. Usually that would be the case, never mind if your partner gets any money. It's pretty much taken as a given that your children would be given a trust fund, so by the time, usually it's like either 16 or 18, when they graduate college. You can stipulate any way you want. You say they will get so much per year for the rest of their lives, basically, in that case.
Basically, we're talking about these worries that will never worry us, you know, in our life.
Probably not.
Okay, you're watching Crossover. We'll be right back. We'll come back to crossover. Now, before the break, you mentioned the practice of setting up a trust fund.
Yeah.
That's actually what Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, they're doing. And they even came to China to try to persuade Chinese entrepreneurs to join them and set up a similar, say...
like a foundation, wasn't it?
Yeah, fund.
That's right. To basically, what was it? It was a huge percentage of their wealth was to be donated.
It's like 100%. And we even invented, actually, Chinese media, they've even invented a Chinese way, Chinese expression to make a naked donation.
A naked donation.
That means 100% of what you own.
Everything.
Will be donated to that foundation.
Yeah, I think though it's a hard sell for ordinary folk, but I think if you're, the top echelons of business, to donate all of your wealth, it seems that actually that's probably even harder.
But the thing is,
if you think about it, though, I think it makes sense. I mean, they've made all this money from society, and rather than keeping it all incredible wealth, keeping it for the family, which they've done studies, and wealth doesn't stay in the family for more than, what, 3 generations?
That's what we say in China, actually. But the thing is, there is also a different argument about their practice. I mean, to pass on all the wealth to a foundation, to a trust. They're saying it's only because they're worried about the huge taxes.
Oh, I see.
Well,
it's like a loophole if you... That's right, because the law is different for different countries. But I know in Ireland, if a husband makes a donation to his wife, she doesn't have to pay income tax on that, which is a kind of a legal loophole for the kind of thing you're talking about.
I guess policies are different in different countries.
With wills, though, if you, with inheritance or things like that, tax is very heavy.
Right.
It's
very high. That's why we have all these scandals like offshore accounts, or donations, or you have these front companies, like they're set up basically just to take, large portions of cash. So that, I mean, people involved in this, the lawyers who are involved in real estate law or executive law, which is basically, the area is all around your estate and what will happen to your money after you pass away, where does it go? And basically they'll try and work out a plan for you that will result in you paying that bare minimum amount of tax. So you get to keep the majority of your cash, or your family do.
Yeah, if we compare the two different kind of practices, say either you pass on all your wealth to a foundation, or you make your own arrangements, saying this son gets this, that daughter gets this. I guess this is also the difference of the different cultures, the Chinese culture and the Western culture. And at the same time, it's not that all these children of these business people, their wealthy people, are not taken care of, because according to the reports, and to take care of these children is also a part of the responsibility of these foundations.
Right.
So they don't have to worry about their life. But at the same time, as you said, in the Western culture, people are, they tend to be more independent identities, and they have to live their own lives. Well, in the Chinese culture, because we focus more on the notion of being a family, and everyone is a member of this big family, and to take care of every member of this big family is the responsibility, not a foundation, but of this leader of the big family, all these tycoons. That's why they have to make an arrangement like that.
Right. Yeah, I suppose, it would make sense, the logic, that to provide for your family afterwards. And then the question comes, when you reach a certain level of wealth that you couldn't possibly spend in one lifetime.
No.
So what do you do with the money? Do you keep it all, or do you give it all away, or how do you use it? So I think that's the question that's becoming more and more prevalent now.
And I think the whole notion of these incredibly wealthy people, leaving the bulks of their fortunes to these charities or foundations, I think it's great. Because, they went through their lives taking all of society's money, making money from society, and now, okay, fine, they're giving it back, not necessarily just, here everyone have some cash, but, in focused sort of helpful ways.
Yeah, it's kind of like social responsibility. When you achieve a certain level of success, and as you said, you're taking through whatever means, either through your own, endeavors, but you are taking. You're getting a huge income, 10 times what a normal salary would be. I suppose you're left with, it's kind of like a moral dilemma. You've got all of this wealth that you'll never use up. It's an inexhaustible supply. So what do you do with it? You're given a chance, you're given an opportunity and like Bill Gates and many other entrepreneurs, they say, well, okay, I'm going to use, even if I use 90% of my wealth, I'll still be one of the richest men in the world, and I can use it to set up foundations and schools, or, you know, development centers for research, or, you know, Doctors Without Borders. I mean, there's so many worthwhile charitable organizations that you can be involved in, that you could really, as you know, the expression is, as you leave the world, what you want to leave behind, like to leave an impact, a positive impact.
Exactly. I mean, as I said earlier, we are worrying the worries that will never worry us anyway. So, now, but talking about these business people, these wealthy people, I mean, as an entrepreneur, as a small entrepreneur, they worry about their own living standards. And then when I make a profit, okay, this is going to help improve my living standard. But when they become more successful, they start to worry about, you know, all these staff members of the company. So this is a bigger cause. When they become as successful as Bill Gates or Warren Buffett, I mean, all wealth is just, I guess, a matter of figures, the change of figures.
Absolutely.
It's not about, you know, living standards. It's not about spending their wealth. It's about making a change.
Absolutely.
This is a part of their life, and that's it.
Yes, definitely.
Which I think, you know, and not to sort of go back again to how different it is, but I think, you know, the fact that a lot of this is making the news in China and is such a focus for the media and for people is because it's not, you know, traditionally it hasn't been done this way.
No.
But I think it'll be very interesting to see, you know, how, you know, the world's getting smaller, you know, we're one sort of big international family, so to speak. It'll be interesting to see, you know, how these sort of notions that aren't so much in Chinese culture traditionally, how they come and get incorporated, with Li Ka-shing.
Well, they might have different concerns because, I mean, the big group, Li Ka-shing, he owns all these listed companies. And to keep it stable, it's only beneficial to all these listed companies. And if something comes up when he passes away in the future, then it's going to be bad to all these listed companies. And I guess he's also doing it out of concern for the future prospect of all these companies, sub-companies.
Well, for a man like Li Ka-shing in his position, whatever he does will affect the stock prices because he's just such. And like Rupert Murdoch, it's exactly the same thing. Whenever you see it before, whenever there's like a bulletin on the news, he's been taken to hospital. You see a drop in stock prices. People are dumping stock as quickly as they can because the unknown is the worst thing that can happen to a stock market. Is his company going to dissolve after he passes away? Is his son going to run it into the ground? Or maybe he's going to be super successful. But the stock owners, stockbrokers, they don't know. So that's why whenever there's one central figure, like Rupert Murdoch or Bill Gates or Li Ka-shing, it's the same thing. Every time, whether his health is good or bad, it definitely directly affects the stock prices. So I suppose it's kind of, when you get to this stage, it's no longer a case of like as a Chinese person or as an American. You're like an international person. You've got so much power and so much influence that it goes beyond like traditional Chinese values.
That's right.
So you really have to think globally rather than just like domestically and locally.
Yeah, and in today's discussion, in today's edition of Crossover, three of us are pretending to be the wealthy people.
Tycoons!
For at least this 30 minutes. Anyway, you're watching Crossover. Take a break. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Crossover. And today we're talking about all these arrangements about, say, the distribution of wealth of these big families and all these successful business people. Before the break, Charlotte, you mentioned this, the sayings, the concept saying the wealth will not stay in the family for longer than 3 generations. They have reasons for saying that.
Okay.
Well, either because the first generation is doing so great, and either they don't really have time to take care of the second generation. Well, the second generation might not be able to pick up all these talents or techniques or whatever that makes the generation, the first generation, the first generation, then maybe the second generation won't be able to continue the success of the big family. or the second generation are just too comfortable. They live in a wealthy family, everything is being taken care of, and they don't really have to worry about their life. Maybe that's the moment when they will lose the edge of the big family. Or, you know, the first generation is successful. They maybe have different marriages. That may result in, you know, all these offspring, different sons. Right. They share the wealth, and they have to fight actually for the all their share of the pie.
Right.
That means it's not cohesive anyway.
Right.
It's not a harmonious picture anyway. So that's I guess that's why some of the reasons why people would say the wealth will not stay long.
Oh, I see.
I think it makes sense. I mean, just because, you know, someone might be a, you know, hugely successful businessman, for example, you know, their child might be someone who loves to teach.
Right.
And as a teacher, you're not going to make millions and billions and trillions of dollars. So, you know.
But in the Chinese society, if the son of a wealthy man chooses to actually develop his or her own career, take her on his own path, there is also that concept of filial piety. You won't be seen, you know, this is not just to be seen as filial or kind to the parents, because they would have their own expectations about their sons and daughters to, you know, to pass on, to take over the responsibility when they get old. But if you choose to be a teacher, say, I mean, that's a blow, like, to their head.
Well, it depends really, first of all, on the situation of your parents or whoever it was that made the family fortune, and what you decide to do with the name. If you have the same surname, say, for example, your surname is Gates, right, and your grandpa was Bill Gates, right, and you're working on selling hot potatoes on the side of the road during the winter months, and people would say to you, well, wow, what happened? What went wrong? But if you, the same surname, you do something for good, still using not your family influence, but your own efforts. So if you, for example, work as a teacher or a doctor, you know, doing charitable work or, you know, free eye operations, whatever it is, and your surname is still Gates, obviously, then people will say, wow, not only are you've established yourself as this independent person who, in the spirit of the great philanthropist, Bill Gates, but all through your own efforts. You didn't use his name to further your own gain. The problem is, though, as we all know, recent years there's been so much negative reporting about, as you said, sons, mostly sons of wealthy coal owners, coal mine owners, with all sorts of trouble, overseas causing all sorts of hassle. And really, they're damaging the good name. Giving the benefit of the doubt, they're damaging the good name of these people who've made their fortune. So if you can use your own efforts and carry on the good name, I think that if you were to ask the people who made all this money, like the Bill Gateses of the world, how do you see your sons and your grandsons, the work that they're doing? I'd say that most of them would be quite proud. I think it's a case of you're carrying on not only the financial wealth, you're inheriting the wealth, but you're inheriting a responsibility.
That's true.
I'm sure that people like Li Jiacheng, when they are deciding on who should get what, they're also thinking of, well, which one of my sons can I... Well, he's got two sons, but I'm sure that he thinks that both of these sons not only are responsible, but also they're responsible to the name, the brand, basically, for want of a better word.
The dynasty.
Exactly. The dynasty that I have set up, that they will carry themselves in a dignified and professional manner, that I can rest assured that if I give them billions of dollars or I give them controlling options of these companies, that they won't destroy it.
Overnight,
and even if they decide to do something unrelated to this, they'll still be able to hold their heads high, because they're carrying on the spirit of what it is that these people wanted in the first place. So,
I mean, to some extent, it's unfair to all these younger generations, because it's like they were born
into wealth,
burden, you know, a responsibility,
right?
But that's the life they have to face. I mean, you have something, you lose something.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's not only. I mean, the concern is not only with these tycoons like Li Ka-shing or Bill Gates, it's with all these successful business people, entrepreneurs in China these days. Because remember, we have an increasing number of successful businessmen. And we're not talking about maybe billions, but we're talking
millions.
about hundreds of millions,
Yeah.
or even millions, tens of millions. They are rich. They are also worried about their own issues, say, because remember, we have this one-child policy in many families. In many cases, they only have one daughter. So what do? According to the traditional understanding, daughters will be married to some other guys. They will be bearing a different surname.
Right.
But anyway, you have all these wealth. You have the factories. You have the companies. And what do you do with that? And you have to ask your daughter to carry on that responsibility together with the son-in-law.
That's right. I think that's actually a very Chinese thing, particularly for not the billionaires, but certainly the millionaires.
Yes.
As they increase in wealth, they become more traditional. They feel like they have a responsibility not only to their family, but to the country, to the traditions of China. So you see, especially on a smaller scale, very wealthy people in, say, second-tier cities, you notice that they spend more time analysing, the ancient writings of Confucius. And the same thing, they're more kind of, place more emphasis on boys rather than girls.
Okay.
It becomes more apparent, I've noticed. But when you get past that level, you go even higher, like, we keep going back to Li Jiatong, it becomes too big. It's just too big to be, to be held within the confines of one particular country's culture, because your decisions affect the entire world. So you you can't hold the world to task because of traditions that you grew up with. You have to think globally. But if you're on a much smaller scale, I've noticed that the bosses tend to be more traditional in that response, and that's where the problems start. Like with my will, if I only have one daughter, for example, traditionally, she shouldn't get the money. It should go to a son that I don't have. And then when she marries, her name is going to change. So does that mean that's the end of my dynasty? So, these become more pressing concerns, I think, depending on what side of the scale. If you're really high up, then it's not so bad. You could get... I mean, if, for example, Li Jiatong had a daughter, had only one daughter, I am sure what we'd be talking about would be the same result. She would inherit. And the news item would be, she's the first Chinese...
to inherit an empire.
An empire. What's she going to do with it? But it wouldn't be because he's so well known. That wouldn't be a concern because he only has one daughter. She can't, inherit the wealth.
This wealthy second generation has really gotten a bad reputation.
Yeah.
Understandably, in many cases, but also, not so fair in other cases of just sort of knowing how to spend their parents' money, drive around in fancy cars, and they don't work, they don't have any special skills or talents, and they just know how to spend their parents' money. And there are, a great collection of these people in Chinese society today, but you also have, the fu'er dai, the rich second generation that does have, a sense of responsibility, that might be interested in their parents'